This is a famous story that took place in the 1980s. The mother of a young girl, although having passed away a week earlier, mysteriously continued to appear every day to cook for her daughter. The situation was only discovered when neighbors smelled a foul odor and reported it to the police. This incident is considered a real paranormal phenomenon, but to this day, it remains an unsolved mystery. The story took place in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, in the Kowloon City area, known for its chaotic and complex nature, like a mix of dragonfish. The people living there were mostly from the lower class, enduring harsh living conditions in an environment full of pollution, with an unpleasant smell year-round. One day, Xiao Guoqiang, a resident of the area, was on his way home when he began to smell a strong odor, growing increasingly unpleasant, resembling the stench of decaying flesh. He traced the smell to an apartment on the 4th floor, where a woman lived with her 2 daughters. What was suspicious was that no one had seen them leave for several days. Feeling something was wrong, Xiao Guoqiang and a neighbor named Song decided to call the police. Just a few minutes later, 2 officers arrived at the scene. When they knocked on the door, they found it was unlocked. A gentle push was enough to open the door. Sensing that something was wrong, the officers quickly drew their guns and entered. Inside, they found only the 2 young girls. After checking the surroundings, they holstered their weapons and began a more detailed investigation. The police asked the girls where their parents were. The older sister responded, "After Mom finished cooking, she went to rest." Hearing this, the police asked her to call her mother out to deal with the smell in the house. However, the younger sister said their mother was very tired after cooking and didn't want to disturb her. At that moment, the police also noticed the food that had been set out on the table. Indeed, there was a pot of hot pot and smoked meat that had just been prepared. The police explained the situation to the older sister and then proceeded to the mother's room. When they opened the door, they found a woman lying on the bed. The police first confirmed her identity, then asked her to get up and address the odor in the house. But the woman did not react at all, as if she couldn't hear the call. Feeling that something was wrong, the police took a few more steps closer. Immediately, they realized the seriousness of the situation. The woman's body and the bed were covered in water, emitting a foul odor. Not only on the bed, but water also spread across the entire floor. The police continued calling out, but the woman still did not respond. Deciding to get closer for a more thorough check, the police finally realized the horrifying truth. The woman in the bed had been dead for a long time, and her body had started to decompose. The police were shocked by the scene, their souls nearly leaving their bodies in sheer terror. Too afraid to think further, they quickly called for backup to the scene. After the forensic examination, it was concluded that the woman had passed away over a week ago. However, the 2 girls insisted that their mother was still alive and cooked for them every day. What was strange was that neither of the 2 girls knew how to cook hot pot with smoked meat. Yet, at that moment, there was a freshly prepared pot of hot pot with smoked meat on the table. So, if the mother was dead, who had cooked that meal? At night, if you're using the restroom and hear noises from the adjacent stall, don't be curious and look over, especially in public restrooms at midnight, because you can never be sure if the person next to you is human or a ghost. This happened to Liu An once. While working the night shift, he had heard rumors that the restroom there was unusual. Though he didn't know the specific reason, Liu An was cautious and tried to avoid using this restroom. There were 2 stalls in the restroom, and Liu An chose the one inside. After sitting there for a little over 2 minutes and just finishing up, he sighed in relief. But just then, he suddenly heard the sound of water flushing from the stall next door. You know, if someone is in the next stall, no matter how careful they are, they still make some noise when entering. But Liu An hadn't heard any sounds before, and yet now there was the sound of flushing. At this moment, Liu An's heart began to race. As soon as the flushing stopped, he heard a strange noise, like the sound of bubbling, and it seemed like gas was continuously spraying from the adjacent toilet. The sound was particularly chilling, sending a shiver down Liu An's spine. However, his curiosity grew, urging him to find out what was happening in the stall next door. Not knowing where he found the courage, Liu An knocked on the stall door. There was no answer. He gently pushed the door open, only to find the stall completely empty, with no one inside. It was just an ordinary restroom, and the flushing sound stopped as soon as the door was opened. But it was the emptiness that sent a chill down Liu An's spine. He would have rather found a stranger inside. That would have been easier to accept than the absence of anyone. The lack of a person made him feel an unsettling fear. Not daring to linger any longer, Liu An ran out in panic. The second incident happened during another night shift, but this time it was with Xiao Wang, a new colleague. That night, after midnight, there were only 2 people left in the hall, Liu An and Xiao Wang. Suddenly, Xiao Wang seemed in a hurry, said a quick greeting, and ran off. But not long after, Xiao Wang returned, looking panic-stricken. He ran frantically, his face as pale as a ghost, his legs weak, collapsing to the floor, his body shaking uncontrollably. Xiao Wang's face was deathly white, his lips trembling, his teeth clattering together. He tried to speak, but he couldn't form a complete sentence. In the end, Liu An only heard Xiao Wang shakily utter 2 words: restroom. Immediately, Liu An's heart started pounding in his chest. Cold sweat ran down his back, and his limbs went ice cold. Jie Wang had just arrived. He didn't know anything about the strange events at the restroom. That night, after drinking a lot of water, he ran to the restroom and chose that very stall. Since the evening wasn't busy, he planned to take the opportunity to check his phone while sitting in the restroom. But right at that moment, the toilet below suddenly flushed, even though he hadn't pressed the flush button. As if that wasn't enough, cold air began to rise from the toilet, making Xiao Wang feel like he was sitting on a refrigerator. He even felt something cold continuously touching his body. As Xiao Wang began to panic, the toilet flushed again on its own. Terrified, he quickly stood up. But as soon as he looked down, he froze, his heart racing wildly. It seemed there was a strand of human hair beneath the toilet. What was terrifying was that the hair kept growing, longer and more abundant. Before long, the hair had spread across the toilet, as if there was a human head trying to emerge from within. Just as Xiao Wang was still in shock, an even more horrifying sight appeared. He felt a huge, cold hand tightly gripping his neck, making it harder and harder for him to breathe. Xi Wang felt like he was about to die and, in desperation, shut his eyes tightly. But suddenly, the hand loosened. Xi Wang gasped, struggling to regain his breath. As he slowly opened his eyes and looked carefully. What was that hair? The hand had disappeared. The restroom looked completely normal. Xi Wang even doubted whether he had seen it wrong just now. But at that moment, the water in the toilet suddenly turned red. Next to the toilet, red water kept flowing down, and the amount of water accumulated more and more. The red color also grew darker, becoming increasingly eerie. Xiao Wang's nerves finally couldn't take it anymore. He screamed wildly and ran out of the restroom as if chased by a ghost. Since then, no one dared to enter that restroom, and it was abandoned and forgotten over time. Strange occurrences, like fake death scenes, still occasionally appear around us. Have you ever witnessed a fake death scene firsthand? And do you know the real cause of this phenomenon? Stay calm and brave, just like 8, our daring friend. The following incident took place in 2005 at the Beikang Crematorium in Sanyi Village, Tianjin. At that time, Li Zhongbing had just graduated from university with a major in forensic science. He chose to work at the crematorium, taking on the role of appearance organizer for the bodies. Although this job was considered unlucky by many, the pay was very high. Moreover, the families of the deceased often sent red envelopes to thank him, which made Li Zhongbing's monthly income quite significant. He planned to work for a few years to save enough money to buy a house in the city. His daily tasks included preparing the bodies, cleaning them, and dressing them in neat clothes. He always tried to ensure that the bodies were handled in a clean and tidy manner. For some bodies, families would request simple makeup to make the deceased look as though they were peacefully sleeping, creating a calm atmosphere for the family and friends who came to mourn. However, bodies that died in accidents, such as car accidents, murders, or similar incidents, were much more difficult to handle. In such cases, Li Zhongbing's master would step in. He had been doing this work for over 20 years and was regarded as the best in the field. No matter how disfigured the body was, he could skillfully arrange it to look as though the person were still alive. One night, during the night shift, Li Zhongbing and his master were working at the crematorium. Night shifts there were usually quite leisurely, so both of them were sitting around passing the time. Suddenly, a car horn sounded from outside. It was the ambulance from the First People's Hospital in Xinhu District, bringing in a body. A homeless person had died on the street, and residents had discovered the body and reported it to the police. After the police confirmed the death at the hospital, the body was transferred to the crematorium. Xiu Song and Xiu Liu, two staff members who had accompanied the ambulance, brought in the body and laid it down. Both looked exhausted and visibly resentful of their job. After completing their task, they quickly left. For bodies without relatives, the process was usually very simple. Just verify the registration information and complete the necessary formalities. Once the police provided the death certificate and cremation certificate, the body would be cremated immediately. After finishing the body transfer, both returned to the task room and began chatting. At that moment, a strange sound came from the morgue area, and Li Zhongbing, curious, decided to check what was going on. He remembered the rule, never let cats or dogs near a dead body. So he headed to the morgue and opened the door. The scene before him was something Li Zhongbing would never forget. The homeless person's body was twitching in an odd manner, as if being controlled by some demonic spirit. What was strange was that when the body had been brought in, he had carefully checked and confirmed that the person was dead. The sight shocked Li Zhongbing, and he began to doubt his previous understanding. He screamed, prompting his master to rush to the scene. When Li Zhongbing pointed to the struggling body to show his master glanced at it without showing any surprise. The master returned to the room and came back with a few red strings. Each string was tied with several coins, and he explained that these were called 5 drops of money. The red strings were specially prepared to handle situations like this. At that time, the body was still twitching, and Li Zhongbing was truly frightened, but his master remained calm. He tied the wrists of the body with the red strings and coins, then proceeded to tie the ankles and neck. Strangely, the body immediately stopped moving. Watching his master handle the situation with such calmness, Li Zhongbing truly realized the terrifying experiences his master had gone through during his 20 years in the profession. After everything was settled, the master returned to the room as if nothing had happened, continuing to read his book to pass the time. But Li Zhongbing's heart could not be at ease. The image of the struggling body still haunted his mind. The next day, during the shift change, the workers who took over also noticed the body. However, none of them were surprised. By noon, the police arrived with the death certificate and cremation certificate. The body was quickly taken for cremation, and no one came to collect the ashes.